Red Pill Alien. So, since I'm a huge fan of the Warhammer 40k series, I there's this faction that I really do enjoy. But sadly, because of recent lore and recent changes to the faction, um, Games Workshop kind of ruined this faction for me. But nevertheless, I still like this faction because of what it was trying to represent in the Warhammer 40k universe. And it's basically a faction called a Tau. And the Tau has this philosophy called the greater good, where everybody can join, and all you have to do is basically help one another to prosper. So it's basically a faction that's kind of like a purely goody two shoes. And it's a faction that also dedicates to science fiction and technology. So the Tau faction is highly technologically advanced, and they constantly prosper in both society, architecture, and of course, science breakthrough and technology itself. Unlike the main faction of the Warhammer 40k universe, which is the Imperium is a stagnant empire, but the Tau Empire is constantly, expanding, constantly um, innovating. So, in comparison, you can understand why the Tau faction kind of won a lot of people over. Except that there's one issue: it's too naive, and it's too good for the grim dark setting of the Warhammer 40k universe. And that's where Games Workshop started to make this faction more sinister in order to be on equal level with the Imperium. And that kind of ruined it for me because I really did like what the Tau was trying to represent. However, and by doing so, they also introduced a new sub faction, which I'll get into in a moment. But the Warhammer 40k universe, I got into it when I was playing a game called Dawn of War 2. Now, this picture right here you see is the commander from the Dawn of War 2. Well, not Dawn of War 2, Dawn of War, Dark Crusade. Sorry guys, I take that back. It's the Dawn of War series. The Dawn of War Dark Crusade, it was the first game to introduce the Tau faction, and I clearly remember loving that game a lot because it was such a well detailed RTS video game. And because they had multiple factions, each faction had an awesome background story, and each faction had an awesome, you know, lore. And in the game, they also had a style of how they play. And the Tau faction, I absolutely love it. The Tau faction is all about range combat, and it's all about high survivability of your units. So unlike the Imperium or other factions like Chaos or Orcs, where they treat their soldiers disposable, the Tau is completely the opposite of that. They treat their own units very valuable, and they try their best to ensure the survivability of their soldiers. And I absolutely love it. And aside from that, of course, they're high tech alien race, and they utilize something I like in the science fiction settings, which is robotics and mech suits. So the Tau faction has basically everything that I like. They're basically a goody two shoe faction with mech suits and robotics. And of course, they're, how you say, very open. They allow anyone to join in their um, empire, which is the greater good. But sadly, Games Workshop kind of ruined it for me because they realize that it's a little bit too good for the Warhammer 40k setting. So they start making the Tau faction more sinister to the point where it's on equal level to the Imperium. However, by doing that, they also introduce a new sub faction, and this sub faction, I'm starting to like it, and I'm starting to relate to it. And that new sub faction is called the Enclaves. Now, this sub faction, the Tau Enclave, is very unique, but it has a fantastic background story. And the character that I absolutely fell in love with is Commander Farsight, which is the picture that you see right here. Commander Farsight is a character that I absolutely can relate to. And of course, as you could tell by the title of this video, Commander Farsight basically took the red pill and he started to realize the reality of the universe that he is in. And he realized that despite the fantasy and the hippie philosophy of the greater good, Commander Farsight realized that it was both naive and not very pragmatic. It's not very how do I say this? It's not a good idea to implement into reality, if that makes any sense. And he realized that this naivety is actually very dangerous and it could cause harm to his own people. So Commander Farsight eventually defected from the Tau Empire and he made his own faction called the Enclaves. And this I absolutely love about Commander Farsight because, as you can imagine, guys, I kind of relate to Commander Farsight. Just like people who are blue pill, once they get out of the matrix and realize the reality that we are living in, you start to hate your own society to the point where you want to leave your society and make your own. And this is exactly what I relate to Commander Farsight. And I have one of his books called Commander Farsight Empire of Lies. This is actually the book itself. It kind of relates to me because, I live in America, and America is basically an empire of lies. Absolutely something I could relate to Commander Farsight. Like, once you take the red pill and fall down the rabbit hole, you start to realize the dumb things of your own country has done. And of course the naivety that they're trying to push. So just to get back to the topic, Commander Farsight, once he realized that the ethereal caste, which are the leaders of the Tau Empire, were basically lying to its people, he realized that they were keeping not only secrets but also a hidden knowledge that's supposed to let everybody be aware of this, for they could, benefit for themselves. And this is kind of like United States in a sense, where our government has a lot of secrets that they don't want to share to the general public. But at the same time, those knowledge can be a good thing for the American people to understand. And once again, this is something where you can relate to Commander Farsight. And once Commander Farsight realized that his government is lying to him and pushing very naive narrative to him, once he found the opportunity to leave the Empire, he did it with a heartbeat. But at the same time doing so, he lost his insanity because when he was falling down the rabbit hole, Commander Farsight, he started to question everything. And I think this is where we could relate to Commander Farsight about his personal red pill rage. And one thing I love about this guy is that when he was going into the rabbit hole and having a mental breakdown, he decided to live in an isolated area into the mountains. He lived far in a faraway planet where nobody could, um, contact him, and he basically lived off the grid for a while. And he basically meditated in order to recover from his mental breakdown issues. But the red pill rage was so strong in him that, yeah, he started to have a mental breakdown. And then once he realized that his people needed him, he decided to come back to society and start fighting again. But what I love about Commander Farsight is that he is still loyal to his people, but he is not loyal to his government, and that's something that I wish to see in real life. But sadly, I'm only admiring stuff in fiction. I do see some people in real life, kind of like Commander Farsight, where they do want to fight for their people, but not for their government. But sadly, the government is always in the way. So that's kind of like a limbo. But anyway, Commander Farsight, a little background story of him, guys, is that he is obviously, just by the look of this picture, he is a leader of a Tau army, and he knows how to fight. Now, the Tau is known for range combat, but at the same time, they're weak against melee. Commander Farsight is the only Tau that's very well known to fight in melee, but he uses mech suit to fight in melee. And that's what I love about him even more. He uses mech suit, and he has a shield generator with a plasma rifle on the shield generator, and he still fights in melee. And of course, as you can see in this picture, he also uses robots. So he's basically a red pill alien that's using high-tech stuff, and he made his own faction, which is the Enclave faction. And yet, he's still fighting for his people because, his people is what basically is basically his tribe. He's loyal to his tribe, and he does not want to abandon it. But at the same time, he is disgusted with his government for lying to his government and putting their people in danger for pushing naive narrative. Now, the reason why Commander Farsight had a mental breakdown is because he realized the universe is not a rational place, and there's a lot of scary stuff out there. And sometimes he realized that there are factions that he cannot reason with and have them to join the Tau Empire, which could potentially put his people in danger. So, to give you guys an example, the Tau Empire tried to reason a faction called the Orcs, but the Orcs are a warlike race that loves fighting, and all they want to do is just fight, no matter what. But the problem is that once they got involved with the Tau faction, in other words, when they got into contact with them, the Orcs just attacked the Tau faction endlessly, and they couldn't do anything about it except for fight back. And that's an example of of Commander Farsight realizing that the universe is not a rational place. And to give you guys an example, here's a screenshot of what I picked just to show you guys of Commander Farsight's background story. Now, where it says Farsight began to secretly become highly distrustful for the ethereal class, that's where basically his That's where basically his red pill rage started to become coming into a suspect that they may be controlling the town by more than simple charisma and wisdom, and perhaps more sinister methods. In the aftermath of the victory, Farsight came to realize the threat of chaos and the fact that the universe is not an orderly, rational place described in the Tao philosophy. He also came to a realization that the Ethereal as a caste knew something of this and kept it from the Tao. At first, he merely thought the leadership was flawed, and other castes will be better off seeking harmony with each other without their oversight. But the more he thought on the instance where obedience to the Ethereals had been taken illogical and foolish extreme, worse may many of the action undertake their guidance had seemed at both times wise and necessary. So basically, Commander Farsight realized that, you know, people need to start thinking for themselves and not having complete obedience to the ethereal caste, which is the ruling caste, which is basically the government. And that's why he made his own society, which people are basically free and get to do, well, not get to do whatever they want, but they're more freer than the Tao Empire was. And just to show you another screenshot, at first he merely thought that their leadership was flawed, that the other castes will be better off. Okay, my bad. I'm just gonna read the last sentence. The inevitable conclusion that the Ethereal's control extended beyond simple logic and loyalty to something darker drove him to sickening panic. Heresies began to fill in Farsight's mind, and not even he truly knew why. The truth he held could dissolve the empire and drive the town back to Mount Owl, a fate far worse than the ethereal rule. Unable to tell anybody this truth, but unwilling to pretend or forget, Farsight chose exile over obedience. Okay, so basically, Commander Farsight understood that the truth that he obtained, he realized that the truth can potentially destroy his people, which is the Tao Empire, and that's what Montao means. It means that the state when the Tao starts to destroy itself, and basically the Tao, as both the species and the empire itself, could fall. But anyway, um, so once Commander Farsight realized that the truth that he obtained could potentially destroy his people, but at the same time he couldn't forget it or he couldn't go back to the Tao Empire because he got into trouble. He rather chose self-exile, in other words, going off the grid and live a simple life in the mountains in a faraway planet. And that's exactly what Commander Farsight did because he realized that, you know, this is a very tough decision to make, but this is basically his red pill rage, where he realized the reality of the situation, how the universe is not a very rational place as he thought it was. But regardless, when the Tao Empire needed him, he comes out like a savior, like a mythical savior, and of course, engage his enemy into a glorious melee combat. But what I love about the Commander Farsight is that, to me, he's kind of like a reflection of a red pill hero who just got out of the Matrix and realized that the world that he once thought it was, it it basically wasn't it. He came to acceptance to reality and realized that the world is not what you think it is. It's basically entirely different, and he has to adjust to reality. And once he adjusts to reality, he decided to make his own faction, which is the Enclave faction, and he made in his image, a better government, a more freer government where people could do what they please, but at the same time, people also help each other out as a tribe. So it's a more libertarian government, to be more precise. But anyway, I just want to share this story because the Commander Farsight to me is basically the red pill alien, and I absolutely love the story in the Warhammer 40k universe. So anyway, guys, I'm gonna end it here because things are getting, yeah, things are getting weird around me. All right, see you guys, and have a good night. Bye bye.